G'day, it's Martin Niles here, coming to you again with some useful election information for the federal election on the 21st of May. This election information is all about the parties which are going to be on your ballot, which you can't recognise and you don't know what they stand for, because there's a lot of them on the Senate ballot, no matter who you are, and there may be a lot of them on your reps ballot, your little green piece of paper as well. Whether you vote above or below the line in the Senate, whether you do 1 to 6 with the parties or 1 to 12 with the individual candidates, which you should do, by the way, because it's all about putting the right people into the Senate regardless of their party, so that we've got people of strong values and so on, because they're kind of all over the place, and they also shape the parties by being there. Whether you do either of those things, you're going to get to a point in your numbering where you start to sort of run out of certainty, where most of us, don't worry about that, by the way, most of us have like 4. And then we go, oh dear, now we're scratching and we're looking for where to go. And you'll start to get to a point where you may not recognise the names of the parties. And sometimes people vote on party name because of the way it sounds. However, behind every party name is an ideology. And so that's what this video is about. I want to tell you a little bit about the ideologies behind the names of the parties you're going to see on your ballot so you don't make a big fat mistake. So I have done my best to rank these from left to right on a big pendulum, all the parties, or pretty much all of them. By left, I mean woke. And by right, I mean conservative in values, social values, right? By left, I mean also big government control and so on. By right, I mean libertarian freedom, free speech, small government, that kind of thing. So there is a wokeometer at play here, and there's a freedomometer at play here. High woke, low freedom, left. Low woke, high freedom, right. Okay? Now, here's the problem. Those two things don't always occur together. There are a couple of outliers. So there's one that we'll get to where, for example, it'll be high on freedom and high on woke. It's all right, I'll clarify that when I get there and explain why I put them where I did on the pendulum. But anyway, that's enough of that. Without further ado, I think that's all my introductory material. Yes, it is. Oh, look, it's a rough guide. I mean, one might be slightly out of order or the other, but I think it's pretty reliable. It's not bad overall. Oh, that's right, I knew there was something. I meant to say, my benchmark for this has been the conventional view that Labor is centre-left and Liberal is centre-right. You will disagree, I know, but I had to get some objective plumb line, some benchmarking point from which to work this. Otherwise, what do we mean by left and right? We don't know. One man's extreme right is another man's sort of middle left. We've got to know where we're coming from. So I've said Labor is centre-left, Liberal is centre-right for the sake of argument, and I've benchmarked these on that, around that spectrum, okay? So without further ado, starting with the extreme left, and there's only one party in the extreme left category. They are the Socialist Alliance. And the reason I put them in the extreme left category, which sounds a bit critical, right? But it's because they are anarchists. They believe in violence, they believe in anarchy, they believe in all sorts of really nasty stuff like that. And you'll say to me, well, hang on, that's not left, that's surely, I mean, anarchy is what you get on the right when you get less and less government. But this kind of anarchy is different. Maybe anarchy is a bad word. It basically is the use of violence and anarchist methods in the pursuit of the objectives of the Socialist Alliance, or indeed the objectives of the state, if they were to be in government. That's why you get all these violent protests and nastiness in the US. There is a kind of left wing that is violent, and that's where they are. They're, yeah, extreme left. Anyway, moving into very left wing, there are several. Firstly, the Greens. Say no more. Secondly, a party called Reason, you may have heard of, used to be called the Sex Party, but decided that that wasn't winning them much credibility, so they call themselves Reason. They pretend to be these civil libertarians, you're all free to be a hedonist and live how you please, but truthfully, they're pretty comprehensively woked out, woked, that is, and they have an overt anti-religion, a hard secularist, deliberately anti-faith, anti-religion platform, big concern, very left-wing. Also, Animal Justice Party, they're the Greens for animal lovers. It's a blunt way to describe it, but it works. There's a party here called the Citizens Party, and you say to me, oh, Citizens Party, interesting. Well, they're full-blown communists, okay? They just are. They couldn't call themselves the Communist Party, except that the guy that they follow, yeah, he's a bit more nuanced than that, but they are communists. Fusion Party, very left. That is an alliance of several smaller parties that got together. The Science Party, the Secular Party, the Pirate Party, the Climate Change Justice Party, and the Climate Emergency Action Alliance. They're woke on social policy, they're pretty full-blown climate warriors, they believe in universal basic income, but here's the other thing, like Reason, they have an overt, deliberate, aggressive, anti-faith, anti-religion, pro-secularist platform, which would set Christian folk and the church in this country, and they work back quite big time. So that's the very left. Moving into left wing, so this is just solid left wing parties, or solidly left wing parties. I've put here Democratic Alliance. Having said solidly left wing, they're actually a bit nuanced. This is Drew Pavlo's outfit, the guy from the University of Queensland. They're anti-China, and they're fairly libertarian, but they're full-blown woke. So you say, well, how does that work? Good question. Drew's a pretty young guy. Maybe he hasn't thought himself through. The fact of the matter is, though, I've had to say left overall because of the woke aspect of and I can't get around that. So Democratic Alliance I put in the left. Australian Progressive, pretty mainstream woke platform. Sustainable Australia, they believe in a total coal mining ban, free universities, they're very high taxing, full-blown climate change and all that kind of stuff. So Sustainable Australia is definitely left. Also of the left, I've put the Indigenous Aboriginal Party. Not because I have anything against Indigenous and Aboriginal causes. Obviously, we all believe in a better life for Indigenous people and the cause there. But this is a very woke view of that issue. It's identity politics driven, more critical race theory, say, than something more balanced. So I've put them on the left. Centre left. This is where Labor now comes in. Labor's pretty wokish, They pretend not to be at elections, but they really are. They're quite statist. You look at the red versus blue states in terms of COVID response, and you will find, for those who watched this, that consistently the red states were more draconian, harsher, and continue to be. More statist, more like the government has the answer. Sit down and shut up, little guy, while we, crush you with government power. That's kind of they're not hard, full on, but they're centre left. TNL. You're going to see a party called TNL. I think who's that? I think it stands for the New Liberals. They're Labour-ish, centre-left. Or if Labor's centre-left, then they're centre-left. Then centrist. I'm suspicious of parties who sound centrist or bill themselves as centrist. This is the kind of party that says, yeah, look, we don't care either way. We just go with wherever all the expert testimony does and all the consulting does and the institutions and the process that have been set up by the democratic process and all of that. We go with where it takes us. And we're centrist. We're these data-driven, democratically driven, institutionally driven, process-driven people. I don't believe it, okay? I just don't believe it. I find parties in the past that have styled themselves as centrist have been hiding something else. But nonetheless, I have to say, based on what I know, Australian Democrats, centre, Australian Values Party, you may not have heard of them, pretty vanilla, middle-of-the-road status quo kind of people. Very balanced, very moderate. I'm sus. Centre-right. Let's move over on to just tipping into the right side of the spectrum, according to the benchmark I chose. Liberal National Coalition. They're not woke, but they are lethargic as to wokeness on the whole. They just let it happen. Oh, it's the economy, stupid. Don't worry about all that. Don't worry about the society going to pot. It's all about the economy. That's kind of where they're at. They do a reasonable attempt at free marketing, I suppose, although less and less. And they believe in slightly more freedoms than Labor do. Then you have the Liberal Democratic Party, the LDP. I've put them centre-right. Very, very hard to classify, I have to say. This could even be wrong. But they are definitely of the right in terms of full-blown free market, full-blown freedoms, liberties, maximum freedom of religion, maximum freedom of speech, never vote for a policy that increases taxes, get the government out of the way, grind the government down, move them into something small, something manageable, and something that doesn't bother us in our lives. I tell you what, I'm very sympathetic to that because increasingly we're looking for that kind of freedom for Christians to function in their beliefs and convictions. So they're very much of the right in that respect. There's a curiosity here, which is that they seem to pursue some woke or left-wing social policy. So you will find a lot of Liberal Democrats will pursue euthanasia and try and introduce it into Parliament. They will pursue the deregulation of prostitution and the sex industry and things like that. They will pursue deregulation, decriminalisation, opening up of gambling and things. You find, they'll pursue decriminalisation of drugs. And you think, oh, that's left-wing. But see, this is the funny thing. They're not doing it for left-wing reasons. They're doing it because they actually just believe shrink the government, get the government out of that space. Less government employees, less government work, less government size. I think truly they overestimate the human nature. And they think people are better than they are. That's what I think is the failing there. But I've put them centre right. There's so much going for them. There's some stuff that I really don't like. So hard to classify. I reckon centre-right. And also, on my other video, you'll see a lot of Christians have got into the LDP. So to a large degree, the direction on those social issues will depend on who from the LDP gets elected. Okay? It depends on the individuals, and there are a number of Christians. Okay, also on the centre right, I've put Australian Christians. If you're in Western Australia, you will see them on your Senate ballot. You may see them on your House of Reps ballot. They're only in Western Australia. Very much, I would say, kind of like ACL in terms of their views and convictions. So if you know us, you know them, mostly. Okay, now I'm going to move into the centre right to right wing. Not quite, I'm not prepared to say that this is full right, but it's centre right to right wing. I'm going to put here the Australian Federation Party. The Australian Federation Party is of the right in the sense that they are incredibly democratised. It's all about having a town hall meeting in every electorate, having citizen-initiated referenda, having all sorts of super grassroots-focused democratisation of process and politics. There's a very strong focus on maximum liberty. They're big on freedoms. They're anti all the COVID stuff that's been going on, the lockdowns and all that. But the other side of it is that they're fairly big on welfare. They do have some stuff about anthropogenic global warming. They have protectionist economic policies, which you will find from here on with most of the parties. There's some protectionism in there. So that's to be contrasted with the idea that we're in part of some global big free market. And the Australian market doesn't need hedging about with tariffs and controls and regulations to make sure manufacturing stays here and farmers don't go out of business. There's an argument, everyone agrees that would be a great idea. There's an argument whether it works, but some people will try for that to be a bit more insular economically. Others will try and be much more free and open and global. So they're more protectionist. That's just to explain that issue. But there's a weird thing with the Australian Federation Party. They want to make animals at law sentient beings, which is bizarre. That starts to give animals rights, and it's messy, right? It's a woke idea, and I just don't know why it crept in there. But anyway. That's the Australian Federation Party. I'm going to say centre right to right because they're very right on some things, but they just pull back on a few others. So that's where I land with them. Centre right to right, I'm also going to put Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. I think this is what the Nationals would be if they weren't tethered to the Liberals. There's not a trace of woke in these people. They have a strong focus on liberty. They're very much straight down the line on opposing a lot of what happened with COVID, the lockdowns and the vaccines and all that, in a way that's not, they're not. They're just saying pro-choice, freedom, liberty, right? Then where am I? They have a strong rural interest. They support shooting, fishing, farming. They support mining. They're very Australia first. Pretty balanced in terms of foreign policy, environmental policy, and that. No trace of ideology, no trace of woke that I can find. And look, who doesn't love country people? I honestly do. I wish I was one. You know, if you know me, that I definitely am not. But I just really appreciate the down-to-earth nature, the practical nature, the non-ideological nature of rural folks. And the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party is a party of the bush, for the bush. And in that, I appreciate that they're for the city too, because they're not woke. They've got good values. So centre right to right, Shooter, Fishers, Farmers Party. Then we go into the right. Might have betrayed a bit too much sympathy for them, to be honest. But anyway, then we move into the right. And I think squarely right-wing parties, and I don't mean that's a pejorative term these days, like a criticism. I don't mean it like that. I just mean that they are right-wing in their beliefs and their views of the right compared to the benchmarks that I set. One Nation. Pretty consistently right-wing, I'd say, on their policy. Consistently not woke. The thing about One Nation, which will contrast them with a couple of the others that I've mentioned on the right of the spectrum, is that they are engaged in the culture wars. They have a pro-life policy, for example. It's not something you find with many of the others, I think one other. They do engage in culture wars, so their not wokeness is much more manifest because they actually talk about those sorts of issues. Most other parties avoid it, and it depends on the individual candidates. So they're not woke at all. They are silent about a couple of things, but not as many as others. Maximum freedom. There's a little bit of economic protectionism in there, but they're pretty consistently run-of-the-mill right-wing. I would say the same about the United Australia Party. I'm a little concerned about the UAP's personality cult thing. If you go to their website, the stuff it says about Clive and the presentation of Clive is a bit icky and not true. But anyway, it's amazing. Heaps of Christians have got into the UAP. Heaps! And so you get the right people elected, it could be a Christian party. It's pretty incredible. But they're consistently, I think, of the right economically. They're big on solid economic foundations and free markets and all that. Bit of protectionism, a little bit, particularly on a few key issues which draw them back. But also, they don't say much about social policy, so it's hard for me to apply a wokeometer here. I think it really, the future of the UAP is really going to depend on who gets elected to represent the UAP. I really think that, especially on the woke stuff. But they believe, obviously, in maximum freedom. We know that, in liberty. They are mostly free market and seem unwoke. So they're right. Okay, I'm going to move now into one party which I have put into the very right-wing category. Notice I started with an extreme left, and that was Socialist Alliance, and then I went into very left. I'm not going to have an extreme right, because I think on the extreme right you need to have something that's equivalent in terms of violence or in terms of some kind of white supremacist kind of view of the world or something like that. We don't have anyone like that. In fact, I think they'd be chased out of the nation with pitchforks. But I'd say bordering to the very right is the Great Australian Party. So I'm not bashing them as extremists. I'm just saying that they are properly right-wing. They are really not very free market. They're far more protectionist. Otherwise, yeah, maximum freedom, no woke that I can find, but they're pretty silent on a lot of things, like the UAP. There is one thing that gets me, though, and it's the same thing that I think it was the Australian Federation Party had. What is it with this animals should be recognised as sentient beings in law? It's a mental idea, and it's so out of kilter with parties that otherwise, maybe it's trying to attract another kind of voter. I don't know. But legally, I just don't know how that would work. And I just personally, from a theological point of view, think it's wrong. Anyway, it is what it is. Great Australian Party, very right. Now, there are 4 parties that I've just listed here that are kind of like, a couple of them are single issue parties. Federal ICAC now is a single issue party. They just want ICAC federally, the Commission Against Corruption, I've forgotten how can I forget what ICAC means? I did, never mind. But they're genuinely single issue. They just want this this anti-corruption body to be set up federally. And it's a very left-wing idea, actually, because it says basically more centralised government oversight of government creates a better government. I think people living in New South Wales might query that. So that's a single issue party. The other single issue party is legalise cannabis. Genuinely just want to legalise cannabis for anyone and everyone. Grow as much as you like, smoke as much as you like, share as much as you like. That's it. And then you have 2 parties which are narrower in focus. Informed medical options, not single issue, but doesn't have a full-blown suite of policies. But of course, it's all based around the idea that, you should have freedom of choice in vaccinations and things like that. But also they have a pro-life policy, which is rare and very interesting, but it seems to tip them over onto I think they're squarely more of the right, whereas the ICAC, I think, is more of the left on the whole. Then you have the Seniors United Party. Quite a mixture, to be honest. Mostly sounds centre-right and conventional, but there's a couple of virtue signalling in there on sort of same-sex marriage, euthanasia, a bit of lefty tax policy. So probably around coalition-y kind of territory for the Seniors United Party. I haven't covered the Victorian Socialists because they're just similar to Socialist Alliance and they're only in Victoria. I haven't covered the Western Australian Party because I don't know. And they're in WA. Look them up. You might know them. I haven't covered the Jackie Lambie Network, only in Tasmania. And I'll tell you why. Nobody knows how Jackie Lambie thinks. I can't rank her. I just can't. I don't know how the synapses join up. And that's just an absolute fact. I'm not being mean. It's just true. I have no clue what her philosophy is. Probably doesn't have one. And on that note, that is the left to right spectrum. I hope you stuck with me. I hope you noted down all the names of those parties, and I hope it's helpful. So you know what to avoid and what to be attracted to. When you get past your sort of 3, 4, 5 on your Senate ballot and you're going, where next? You don't stray into any really dodgy areas. All right, that's it from me. Thank you.